everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cammy Bell, and it is my pleasure to bring on to Extra this week, making his season debut for season 25-26, is the Bear from the East, Mr. Rob Shorthouse. Rob, how are you keeping, my friend? Everything safe and well?
I'm good. Do you know what? I'm the worst type of glory hunter, Cammy, because I've been hitting you with all sorts of excuses to not come on over the past few weeks because we've been utter garbage. And now here we are, 2 wins in a row, and I'm like, right, yeah, sign me up. When can I come on? So, yeah, pure glory hunter. And
I mean, you say excuses, but I would give them some legitimacy, given the fact that it's usually a tornado or a hurricane or some sort of typhoon, or you haven't had electricity for 3 days and all of that kind of stuff. But as long as you're not starting another global pandemic, I'm going to forgive you.
Aye, fine. You can forgive us the typhoons, but the coronavirus not so much. But no, look, I'm delighted to be on. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk to you, particularly when we've got something positive to discuss and something exciting to look forward to, which is what we've got tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, it's it is change days. We're going to talk about the win at Easter Road last night. And keen to get your thoughts, firstly, on Danny Rule coming in. And then, as you rightly say, we have got the League Cup semi-final against that lot at Hampden on Sunday. Rob, we've not had a chance to, as I say, get you on since all of the managerial faff that's kind of happened. Russell Martin, thankfully, has exited stage left. And we have now finally been able to bring in a new head coach. And I'll be honest with you, on last night's viewing, I'm encouraged. There's definitely some green shoots of improvement in there.
There is, Cammy. And I think, there's a sort of sense of happiness that just comes from somebody that's willing to be flexible and willing to be a bit more pragmatic and deal with what's in front of him, not just go by what his ideology says that he should do. Because I think we've seen that since Danny Rule's come in, that he's been willing to adapt and tinker and move things around based on who the opposition are and what you think the best game plan is. Whereas obviously we didn't get that under Russell Martin. It was very much a here's my philosophy and that's the end of it, and I'm going to try and wedge players into this philosophy even though it clearly doesn't work. So I think that's my first sort of sense of it all, is that his flexibility is very much to be welcomed. His, I think, initial appearances give you a bit of confidence as well. I think he's got a proper sense of the job that's in front of him. He's not going to come in and do what Russell Martin did, I think, which was to try and tell you that those things that your eyes have seen did not actually happen. And his version of the truth is the actual truth. I think he's been pretty honest, but positive. But given he gives you the confidence and the sense that he understands the job that he has to do, and the challenge that lies ahead. But he's willing to be honest about it, which I think is really, really good as well. So I must admit, notwithstanding the sort of farrago that was the actual managerial appointment process, I think we've landed on this guy. I think he was always in the mix. It'd be wrong to try and suggest that he was first choice, but he was a name that was always in the mix. He's who we've got, and like you, I think we're seeing positive signs from the way that he himself carries himself as a manager, but also the way that he sets out the team with that sense that he can and will be flexible when flexibility is a thing that's required.
Yeah, one of the things that I suppose, and it's maybe my pessimism as I get older in years, but there's obviously been the takeaways that he speaks well and he does come across as he's clearly intelligent, and he's had a good level of experience so far within the game, and my hope was that whenever we did land on a candidate, the 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 board had a duty of responsibility to say to that candidate, before you say yes and you put pen to paper, just realise what it is that you're walking into. And in his initial interviews and what we heard from him last week, it felt to me like he was intelligent enough to be able to understand the capacity of the job. He's going to learn whilst he's in it, obviously. And we got some really good glowing references from Sheffield Wednesday fans. We had an excellent podcast that our very own James Forrest did on our Patreon site last week with a Sheffield Wednesday fan who was very, very glowing about Danny Rule. So, but there was also an element of me as well, Rob, where I thought, I'm happy to hear this, but I need to see it. I need to see what he's going to do. And it's that old adage, obviously, actions speak louder than words. And what I will say to him is that he very much came out with a very interesting starting lineup against Hibs at Easter Road on Wednesday night, where it definitely looked, where provoked a conversation at least, where we looked at it almost as a 3-5-2 with maybe just, as I say, the wingers in terms of having to do a little bit of extra running, shall we say, in terms of how they were getting back and forth in McGomit and Aarons. But that back three of Giga, Suter, Cornelius, Suter is captain because he made the decision to drop James Tavernier to the bench, and then a front two, what it felt like was Chermiti and Danilo. I get the fact that managers will say, as soon as they come in the building, everyone's got a clean slate. We have to start it again. I absolutely am of the belief that Russell Martin does not pick a team that sets out like that. But for the first opening 20 minutes, he absolutely stood behind his decision, and I thought it worked well.
Yeah, look, it was what was it they say in Yes Minister? That's very bold, that's very brave, Minister. But look, he's as I was saying, at the start there, Cammy. I think he's a man who is prepared to make changes and be flexible based on the circumstances that he finds himself in. Look, to your earlier point, there's absolutely no way that he didn't know the challenge he was coming into, and all the things that were going on. And even if he didn't, that first game in Europe last week would have given him a complete understanding of just how shambolic large sections of the squad were, and just morale and confidence and all those different things. So I think what I like, and I guess that's what you're saying as well, Cammy, is that he's prepared to say, right, we have to start winning games. We have to start keeping clean sheets. And I know we'll talk about that tonight, about the fact that we finally got a clean sheet after, I think Davey said on his post-match last night that it's the first clean sheet away from home since Scott Simon was manager. And you laugh because it's true. So the fact that he's prepared to make those bold changes to drop Tav, to go to three at a back, and I like the three at back, by the way, but I think that's just maybe the old 90s Rangers fan in me, that remember that season where Walter sprung it to three at the back, and that was glorious. But I do think the three at the back actually could work for us because of.
But sorry to cut in, Rob, but I think that point's further amplified when you also consider the current situation of a team that's shit out of confidence going to Easter Road, where Hibs have not lost in over a year.
Yeah,
it amplifies how brave a decision that is.
Oh, it absolutely is. But as I say, I think he's looking at the players, and while we can all say, yep, that's a brave decision, you can also, I think, look at it and say that makes a lot of sense, because we know that Giga, particularly since, I mean, he's been a bit absent since Bruges and the sort of horror show he had there. And we know that he's got a mistake in him. We know that John Suter's got a mistake in him. I really like the look of Cornelius, but I think having that back three gives opportunity, I think, to be a bit more resolute at the back, and that really has been one of the big problems, not just under Russell Martin, but in previous regimes as well, where we've just given away so many stupid goals and given away the same goals over and over and over again. So I think taking a decision that says, no, we're going to try something different, I think, yes, it was brave, yes, it was bold, yes, it was a conversation starter, but actually when you look at it, I think it's pretty smart. Now, whether he sticks to it and whether that's something he's rigid about, I don't know, because in his post-match comments, he was talking about it might not always suit the game that they were playing, because I think he was expecting a lot of sort of long balls in behind and stuff from Hibs last night, which is why he thought a back three would work. But no, I like it. I like the solidity, the rigidity, and the fact that it gives a bit of cover for the inevitable, Suter disaster or whatever that's going on. So I think it is good. The interesting question, I suppose, about the wing backs and whether these, in some games, particularly domestically, whether those wing backs can actually be wingers as opposed to fullbacks. Whether I think the sort of two wingers, Gassama and Antman, could actually potentially play that role as well, because I think their natural game is to get in behind. So I think, it's interesting, and it's also, you know, yeah, it gives you a bit of hope, Cammy, I suppose, that he's willing to try different things, but also not just throwing stuff against the wall, which is where you kind of felt where we are with Russell Martin at times. So yeah, I think it's a good starting lineup, and and I really like that back three.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've also seen, we saw it throughout the game as well last night, that it'll be fluid in terms of how he wants to be able to do that, in terms of how the game is obviously going, and what I think it's probably taught us is that he will flex it in order to suit whatever changes the opponents might make. We'll go to obviously try and implement a game plan, which is how we started it with last night, and taking the lead with an excellent Danilo goal, which we'll touch on in just a second after 5 minutes. But he will look to obviously make changes and work with what he has in terms of how that sits within there. There was an element where I always felt that Russell Martin, his system and what he wanted to do, because he was so wedded to it, inhibited the players. And I think what we've certainly seen, and we saw it against Kilmarnock, Bran was a difficult game, right? We have to be able to call it out. It was so difficult a game last week, Rob, that I said that we played in Austria, when in actual fact we were in Norway. That's how difficult a game it was.
It would have been better playing in Austria, I think, Cammy.
But like you say, he was just in the door. He had to understand what he had to work with. So that game came far too soon for him. Against Kilmarnock, I think it looked a lot better. And then, as I say, going away to Easter Road, being able to pull out that result, just again starts to give you the encouragement that the improvement is coming.
Cammy, just on that, because I think it's a really important point, about the kind of green shoots and all that kind of stuff. It's the nature of the win as well. Like, we all hate that sort of cliche of, under Russell Martin, we would never have won that game and all that kind of stuff. But actually, there is something really positive about grinding out a win at Easter Road, which, is a tricky place to go to. But, the fact that it was a ground out victory, and the message that says internally to the players, I think that, you can do this, that you do have this in you to not just, it's not all about, scoring goals, but, you can keep a clean sheet. You can do this dirty stuff, like, that Connor Barron did so well in the second half last night to break up the game and stop the opposition. So I do think that, as well as the optimism that comes from winning games again, there's something quite important about winning a game like that in the manner in which we did. So, we should feel good about last night, because it is an important win.
Yeah, I think, and again to that point, what it feels a lot to me like, Rob, with what we saw last night, they look less and less like victims. And I think sometimes it's felt like as if we just know that something bad is going to happen, so we just have to prepare for it. Whereas now there's more assuredness, there's a little bit more belief within the squad. And listen, of course, they will start to feel that when, some of the stuff that you mentioned in there, you get a couple of wins on the bounce, you put in some good performances holistically as a team, you do keep the clean sheet and stuff. Obviously, we have Jack Butland to thank for that. But these things, they might feel standard, but it's what this team has needed in order to be able to lift its levels up a little bit more, and that's been huge. We have to talk about Danilo, who, as I say, was pretty much out of the picture under the previous head coach. However, has been given his chances against Kilmarnock and obviously against Hibs. And he's answered a great goal, I thought, against Kilmarnock at Ibrox last Sunday, with a lovely header just off the inside of the post.
It really was lovely, yeah.
And he complemented it really well with a brilliantly taken goal. It's a slide pass that comes in from Chermiti. It's a little bit behind him, but with a lovely roll of the ball from the bottom of his foot, creates a little bit of a space for him to get the shot away. And yeah, it's really in tight towards the keeper's left-hand post. A brilliant finish. And I've always said I enjoy seeing strikers being able to try and get goals if they break their duck. We were hoping for the same from Chermiti after scoring against Kilmarnock. We'll definitely touch on him in a minute, but a great goal by Danilo came at a really good time where I think Rangers had started the game really positively, gave them that platform to continue to build on. And I think they did build on it for at least the next 20 or so minutes after the goal, where it came out a positive play, penetrating, being able to get the ball forward. And that's even just from the back line, is being able to get that there's none of this hesitancy to play a forward pass. We want to be able to get the ball into spaces where we know it'll hurt the opponents. Um, and listen, it's just a delicious finish. Everyone's obviously talking about Danilo's dad being there. He's absolute number one cheerleader. But for a guy who, like you say, has had such a difficult time at Rangers with injuries and everything else as well, it can be easy to forget. Actually, some of his finishes are exceptional. They're clinical. He knows exactly what he wants to be able to do with it, and he sniffed out that chance and was able to put it away. As I say, just being able to probably within his first few touches of the ball.
Yeah, it's a peach, Cammy. It's an absolute peach. You know, the way that he makes the space for the shot with that little roll that he does, you know, it really is lovely. And look, the thing about Danilo is, you know, there is a temptation, I think, at times to just give up on somebody. You know, like it's just never going to happen, and that's the end of it. And you know, in the past, and the area that we grew up watching Rangers, you know, you could sign a player like Solenko or whoever it was, didn't work out, you would move him on, you bring somebody else in, and we don't really have that luxury anymore. So I think we do have to try and get a tune out of him because, like as you say, he's been unlucky. He had it's not just the fact that he's been injured; it's the type of injuries he's had. It's just kept him out. It must have done his confidence, all those kind of things. But we spent a load of money on this guy, and you know he has shown us at times that, as you say, Cammy, he's got the ability to do things like he did last night. So I again, it's another thing that I like about the new manager. You know, he's obviously taken a look at the players and he's thought, right, I'm going to give this, excuse me, give this guy a go. And on the point about, you know, if you're a striker and you're coming back into the team and you've got your goals and all that kind of stuff, I think that just I wonder about how much the absolute disaster that we were defensively had affected the more forward and creative parts of the team as well. Because you must constantly be thinking, I can't lose the ball here, or I've got to do something with the ball because it's just going to. If I lose it, then you know the opposition is going to get a free run running at our bomb scare of a defence. So being able to look back at your mates and say, you know, they're doing their job, or defensively we're in much better shape. I think that should give you a bit more license to be a bit more creative and be a bit more confident when it comes to going forward. I mean, I don't think we are even remotely close to being where we should be about going forward. And you know, last night was not a brilliant game, but I think you know we've all played the game, Cammy. If you know that you've got a rock solid defence, it does give you more confidence if you're playing in midfield and the attacking spaces as well. So hopefully that improvement defensively does allow Danilo to continue because, as I say, we've got to get a tune out of this guy. We spent what £6 million on him. He's spent the best part of 2 years out injured, and we need goals. And Miovski's not playing brilliantly, and I know we'll talk about Chermiti. He's certainly not ready to be our number one striker. So we do need Danilo to be doing what he did last night, which is scoring great goals.
And I would almost term that as a little bit of the kind of Jack Butland syndrome, because he's doing his part. And he's obviously looking at the guys in front of him to say, look, I am doing what I can here. There's a reason why Jack Butland at this point in time has probably been our player of the year, because he's pulling out saves that he feels that he shouldn't have to make. But what's happening in front of him is so fragile because of that tentative nature that you've mentioned. So even if you are playing up top and you then feel like I've got to hold this ball up or I've got to do something because ultimately it's coming back the way, Butland has had to do that pretty much throughout the course of the season thus far, because he's then felt I've got to be able to, because I know I'm going to work. I know I'm going to be busy because the ball is coming back to me because of how disjointed it is in front of me. And there's probably an element of that where I absolutely felt that there was some parts of probably some parts of the game where he knew that he could get the defence away from him because they were hampering him, I think, under Russell Martin, and now they are playing further forward, and it gives them a little bit more license to come into it. But we'll come on to Yusuf Chermiti. As I say, a very fortunate goal, I think I'm going to say, against Kilmarnock. But listen, and you don't win the lottery unless you buy a ticket. It was a good strike from him. I think the Kilmarnock keeper could do better, but here we are. I'll be honest with you, Rob, last night, I've tried to defend the guy. I want to, and I've been very vocal about this, I want to be able to separate him away from the transfer fee because that's not his fault. But there's elements of this where if Danny Rule is going to get a tune out of this guy, he's going to have to be able to say to him about his composure, being able to try and hold the ball up consistently. He did it very, very erratically last night. Sometimes it looked okay, other times it just looked horrendous. He bought a few fouls, which I think, again, helped us. But we need more from him. And it's nothing to do with the price tag. We need more from him because, exactly as you're saying, and I think as a theme of last night's game, we are not in a place where we can sit in a 1-goal lead and put our feet up. We need to be able to get that second killer goal and just make sure that we can get the result put to bed. He has to be able to contribute, and he has to do a lot better than he's doing at the moment.
Yeah, he wasn't great last night, Cammy, was he? And while we can all try very hard to separate the transfer fee and Kevin Thelwell's role in it and all the other baggage that's hanging around about this player, it is very, very difficult to do. And the reality is, for a lot of fans, they will see the full picture. They'll see the full chessboard when it comes to Yusuf Chermiti. And if he has games like last night, then it really doesn't help. So he's a big, strong lad. So his hold-up play should be better. And I know that all the stuff that was coming out during the fan meetings and stuff with Kevin Thelwell last week, where he was talking about his numbers, and they're really excited about the prospect of him and stuff. They're going to have to help the boy, because otherwise, very, very quickly, we were saying before about Danilo that you can write a player off, and you can write a player off very, very quickly, and that could happen with this guy if he continues to turn in performances like he did last night. I think David, in his post-match last night, described him as raw, and he was talking about, that if you spend £8 million on essentially an academy player from an English club, then that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a raw player, but we just cannot afford, financially or in football terms, to have somebody who is our main guy to be as raw as that. And I don't know what you do, Cammy. I don't know whether it is you just keep on playing with him, playing him so that he can develop, and that might work, or it might make it worse, or you take him at the firing line. And I don't know, but it can't continue the way that it is, in the sense that people will very, very quickly, if they've not already, lose faith in him, and that will not help the boy in his confidence, because we've been going to watch Rangers for a long time, Cammy, and when the crowd has made up their mind about a player, it's pretty obvious that has happened, and it doesn't help the confidence. And stinker begets stinker, and before you know it, you're in a pretty bad place. So I don't know what the solution is for the boy, but he can't be the player that he was last night. Something's going to have to happen, I think, to change the situation.
Yeah, and as much as we've got Celtic in the horizon for the semi-final on Sunday, we've got Roma next week. There's probably games within that where what I would like to still see him get a run at it is probably my honest opinion. But if you look outside of those two games, we're away to Dundee, then we're at home to Livingston, home to Braga, home to Falkirk. We're away at Tannadice, and then we're away at Killie, and that's really just the kind of fixture list for probably the next 5 to 6 weeks. There's games in there where I think he should be capable of getting goals, and my hope is that if you are talking about at home to Livy, if you're looking at the Falkirk game, etc., there are games in there that, as far as I'm concerned, he should be able to contribute in. Because we're not talking about top tier. I honestly have no idea whether or not it would be worthwhile being able to try and play him against Celtic on Sunday, because the difficulty being that it is going to be a tough game. I know that they're a bin fire at the moment, and we'll let them continue to be so. But ultimately, it's the level of these games might be a wee bit too much for him at the moment. It might be better to, as you say, take him at the firing line. Miovski is not doing much better at the moment either. And although, as we say in football, it's a nice headache to have. Obviously, Danilo chipping in with goals now, it does give the manager some options, but you're almost left at looking at, right, he's in a great run of form. He looks like as if he, definitely can contribute for us, and the other two are light years behind him.
Yeah.
So we have to look at it as, from Danny Rill's perspective, he needs to get his arms around Chermiti and potentially Majowski as well, and say, what can make you better? What do you feel is going to give you the best chance here to start to contribute more actively than you're doing? And if he says from that perspective, with Chermiti, is just hold the ball up. I don't need you to focus too much on scoring goals at the moment, but what I do need you to do is make sure that you can keep the ball for long enough that we can come in and support you. Okay, fair enough. And then we start that as the building blocks, and then we build on from there.
Cammy, I think that's fair. Do you know that? Because the criticism that I've got of Chermiti and that I've heard from others is not that he didn't score last night. It was the fact that the ball was bouncing off him and he couldn't hold on to the ball. And for a professional footballer, that's not good enough. And it just contributes to that overall story that the boys potentially a dud and all that kind of stuff that you hear people saying it, which obviously he's not. So I wonder if actually that's the right approach, is just to say, right, let's really concentrate on the basics and getting you to play a really important part in the team as the hold up guy to Danilo or something. Because I think what we saw last night was a different forward shape. We've had front threes before, but it was slightly different. Whether it was a 2-1 actually, and I thought Moore actually was much better centrally. He looked like a player, which he has not. He didn't look at all like a player during the Russell Martin time when he was stuck out on the wing. So, maybe there is a role there as the hold up guy for Danilo, but time is something that's not on his side. Do you know what I mean? Because that, no matter how many times you try and tell yourself that I'm not going to think about the transfer fee, I'm not going to think about all the stuff about, it's just another one of Thelwell's signings from his old clubs and all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is just going to be there. And if he continues to turn in subpar performances like he did last night, that's all people are going to talk about. So I think a role needs to be found for him in the team, if he's going to be in the team, that's going to help him develop.
Yeah, and he'll not be the first player who has been told, look, just take it back to basics. Just do the simple things first, and then get on them, and then we'll continue to build. Because ultimately, we are not in a position we can afford to spend £8 million on a hold-up guy. It's just simply not going to happen. So It's about saying, right, let's do A first, then we'll work on B and C, and B and C will then be the composure element. Because I think you're right. I don't think it was just purely from his perspective of holding the ball up where, he struggled with his touches. I thought that, there was a chance, I'm fairly sure it was in the second half, where it just looked like as if the ball was alien to him and he didn't understand what he had to be able to try and do next with it. It's things like that you can then say, right, be ideally a bit more, I'd like him to be a wee bit more aggressive in terms of what he does. And I don't mean barging into people and giving fouls away. I just mean, push people out the way, create space for others, use the physical element of it, because he's a big lad and he can absolutely do that.
Yeah. I think we just want to see him contributing to the team, Cammy. So, I think look, it's for the management and the management team to decide what role he plays and all that kind of stuff. But I think if we can see a player that is contributing to the team as the team improves, which I'm sure it will over the course of the coming weeks and months, because let's face it, couldn't get any worse. Then I think that will help the boy. But what we can't have is, him being an absolute standout for completely the wrong reasons, which is kind of where he was last night.
Yeah, that's fair. One really bright spark I want to get your thoughts on as well, Rob, was Connor Barron last night, who I thought was excellent. He was my man in the match last night. I think a lot of people were pleased with his performance as well, from the people I spoke to. Really bright, energetic, exactly what we needed within a midfield that I think, for me, up to this point in the season, has felt a little bit too static, too pedestrian. And he brings in some much needed energy in there. He did well in terms of not just being able to make sure that he was good in the ball, and how he was always thinking about being able to try and get the ball forward, which is the positivity that we've been missing. But he did well in terms of breaking up the Hibs play. I thought the game was refereed atrociously by John Beaton. He is properly fallen off a cliff in terms of his refereeing performances, but what else is new? But despite all of that, he was in the faces of the Hibs players. He wasn't backing out of challenges. He was absolutely there to break up anything they could do in terms of forward pieces of momentum. And yeah, I think, like I say, for me, it's been great to be able to see him getting a wee bit of a revitalization and coming back into the team as well.
Oh, 100%. No, he was excellent last night. Really, really excellent. I think he's certainly the stick out candidate for man of the match. I'm sure people would think about Jack Butland because of what happened at the end, but over the course of the game, I thought Barron was terrific. It was a kind of Stuart McCall, running about, busy, lots of energy, breaking up play, but also driving us forward. And look, for the past, I was going to say the past sort of 3 months, but actually it's been way longer than that. We've just been so slow and laboured in midfield that actually you're just crying out for somebody to get a grip of the ball, and drive us forward, and to be in the opposition's faces and everything else. So yeah, I thought he was excellent last night, and he does bring something to the team when he plays. I think some games don't suit him. We've seen games where he's struggled and the game's completely passed him by, but when he's on it like last night, then he really is terrific, and yeah, great performance from him, I thought.
The other thing I would also say within that as well is that I know people had focus on him for giving away the penalty. It is a clumsy challenge, right? But it's a challenge he has to make because of Tav taking a slip after a slight mistouch. And I think he feels, and maybe it was a little bit of a rash challenge, given that the Hibs player was not last man. He wasn't through in goal. I'm fairly sure it might have been Cornelius that was in front of him. But he also feels it's a challenge that he has to be able to make to snuff it out. I think personally that part of that was kind of what we've already touched on in terms of the underlying nervousness of the team to not concede, and not necessarily just concede another goal in the clean sheet situation that I think the last time we kept a clean sheet was under William Wilton. But the whole idea of us, can we get out of here with 3 points? We really need to get out of here with 3 points. And it's fair to say, being completely honest, that I think Hibs had started to come into the ascendancy a wee bit. And it would have felt like so many times of those gut punches that we've had where the result looked as if it could be within reach and it could have been taken away from us. So I totally understand as to why he's felt he's had to come in and make that challenge. But I'm not going to pin any real significant blame to him for that.
No, and look, I mean, I think that Hibs in that last sort of 10, 15 minutes, they came forward and we allowed them to because we started to sit back. And yeah, I mean, on your point about the, maybe we always talk about scar tissue, don't we? That that sort of worry about, we've seen this movie before. I mean, that would be the players would be affected by that as well. That just happened so many times, particularly this season, where we've completely given things away. And I'm sure everybody who was watching the game, or all the Rangers fans who were at the game, when the penalty was given, would just have felt that sick feeling that we've had so many times over the course of the past wee while. But when it comes to Barron, I mean, I think he was knackered. It looked like one of those kind of, as you say, I've got to make this challenge, but he's physically tired, and I think he's just slow. Not helped by Tav, of course, with slipping at completely the worst possible time imaginable. But I mean, I think it definitely was a penalty, and it did just look like one of those, a player who is tired, is in a unexpectedly difficult situation, and he's stuck a leg out to try and make the challenge, and unfortunately he's caught the boy. So it was definitely a penalty for me. But like you, I don't sort of allow that to take away the overall great performance that he had. I mean, it helps by the fact that Butland does a superb job, but and we might be talking entirely differently if Hibs had actually scored it. But I don't look at it and say, well, that sort of tarnished the performance from Barron, because actually it was just an excellent all round performance for the entire time that he was on the pitch, notwithstanding that penalty decision.
And it looks like he won't be able to play against Celtic on Sunday as well. He's totted up too many points due to bookings, etc. He will be a miss. It's a gutter for him because, given his performance last night, and I think he's always keen to make sure that he can play against Celtic. He's enjoyed some decent games against them in the past, but yeah, he's going to be a miss. But it's something else that the manager's going to have to take into consideration, because I don't think that the team that lines up against Celtic at Hampden on Sunday is going to look like what it did last night.
No, it won't, Cammy. It won't. I think if we go back to what we were saying at the start of this, that we have a manager now who's willing to look at games as sort of individual pieces of action that require their own thought processes, and I think that he'll be thinking very carefully about Celtic and how you stop them playing, which we all know is sit on McGregor and everything else, but also how do we get the best out of our team. Be interesting. Diamande and Raskin. I mean, Raskin didn't have a great night last night, I didn't think, but he always seems to save it up for Celtic. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But like you, I don't expect it to be the same team. It'd be interesting to see if he keeps the back three or whether he switches back to the four. It'd be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah, so let's move on to Sunday then, Rob, and I'm keen to get your thoughts in terms of how you think all of that will go, given Celtic's recent travails.
I mean, look, they'll. I think if Brendan Rodgers was still there, then the game would be different from what we're about to face, because Martin O'Neill will be able to motivate them, you would think. I know he's not managed for years and years, and tactically he might not be up on everything in the game anymore and all that kind of stuff, but he is a man motivator and he has a lot of experience in this game. So I'm not really thinking too much about the bin fire that they have been for the past wee while, and more thinking about the fact that he will have them up for it, so therefore we have to be up for it as well. They are not a great squad of players in the same way that we've got a pretty lackluster squad. They have spent an awful lot more money than us to accumulate a lot of dross, mind you, but they still do have a couple of dangerous.
Depending which Celtic fan site you reference. Because a lot of them are very unhappy about the fact that they've not spent money when they absolutely have.
They've spent an absolute fortune, Cammy. I mean, they've got the boy Engels. What's he? 11 million quid, and they absolutely done in that one. But so yeah, so my sense is that we should go into it not thinking at all about the fact this is a team that got horsed by Hearts and beat by, was it Dundee before that? That we should think this is a team that will be well up for it. They're at home, and we should be thinking about how do we neutralise them, while at the same time opening up as many opportunities for ourselves to get forward and get at their defence, because I think Carter Vickers is obviously out for the season. I don't know, is Johnson injured as well? So at the back they are ropey and they're there to be got at. So we need to be thinking about how do we best do that. And we're talking about Moore in that central role, which I thought was quite interesting. I mean, I think we've got to see Asgard doing more and running at players, because I think he's a big, strong lad, and I think he's got something going forward which I've not seen yet. The midfield choice will be interesting now that, as you say, Barron's not available. Whether it is Diomande, Raskin, how does he shape that up? But I think they are there to be got at defensively. They will definitely have opportunities to get at us as well. But how do we exploit their biggest weakness, which is obviously their defence?
Yeah, and that's the big thing, I think. I don't think for a minute that he selected that team with one eye on the semi-final. I think he has to go game to game at the moment, and what he felt last night was where he was going to get the best out of the players that were selected, and Sunday will look and feel very different. As I say, we can't, as much as it's fun to laugh at them, and by the way, I know that it's a little bit of gallows humour because we're not in a great place either, but I'm never ever going to miss an opportunity to laugh at them whenever I can. It is about what we do, and it is about how he can bring those players into. I am not suggesting, I wouldn't be so disrespectful to either Motherwell or St Mirren, whoever wins the other semi-final, that it's a gimme. Let's just look back at recent history, and that's certainly not the case. But I think if you get to the final and you've already been able to put out Celtic, you should rightly be clear favourites, and so therefore it's definitely within touch. And bizarrely, I actually think a semi-final takes a little bit of the pressure off. Rather, it was a final, and we've been cheated out of a few finals with them again in recent history. My hope is that despite the Celtic seeming to have got their preferred officials in to play for Sunday afternoon's game, we have to kind of put all of that noise to one side. And ultimately, what Danny Rule has to say to the team is, this is an opportunity for a turning point. Being able to get into winning, or being able to get into a confident place, let's say, of winning a domestic trophy, the first one available, is potentially 90 to 120 minutes within your grasp. You have to stand up. That's
Yeah.
the thing that you have to do. And you mentioned that with Asgard. I agree with you. Asgard, for me, I get a big unit. He's capable of moving players, but it's not just so much that. It's the idea of that, probably that victim mentality that I discussed before. However much we can possibly eradicate from all of that, because they'll play their games, they'll do their usual dark arts and all of that nonsense as well. Anil certainly not, a stranger to any of that nonsense. But right now, if we were to play them, given their current crisis and their disharmony, let's just do whatever we can to take advantage of that.
Yeah, we've got a job to do on Sunday, Cammy, which is to go out there and win. And I agree with you that Danny Rule would not have picked a team last night with an eye on Sunday because he simply cannot afford to. He's got to get wins under his belt. But what it's almost hard to believe, really, and sort of points to the sort of crazy nature of Scottish football, that we've got a chance of winning a trophy, despite the fact that we are as honking as I can ever remember, and have been over the course of the start of the season. But yet here we are. If we beat Celtic on Sunday, then we've got a chance to get our hands on some silverware, which has not been a common occurrence over the past few years. So, yeah, as I say, I think he will be studying them very closely. But to me, the big job is how do I maximise every opportunity to get at their defence, because I think if you get at them, there's every chance that we could score goals. I just don't think that they are solid at all at the back. Carter Vickers has been so important to them for so long, and they're an entirely different team when he doesn't play. So if he's out, which I think he's out for the season, Cammy, I'm sure I read that somewhere.
Yeah,
That
fairly sure he is. Yeah,
he's out for the season. Then they are there to be got at, and we should be thinking about what players and what formation gives us the best opportunity to really run at those guys, because I just don't think they'll like it. And if you've got somebody like Danilo who's got a wee bit of confidence, he's scored the next couple of games, then I would certainly be playing him and just thinking, how do we get as many chances as possible for him to be right in their faces in the box. And maybe that is thinking about some of the wide players we spoke about earlier, Antman Gassama. How do we shape up in such a way as to give them a chance to get in behind? Because I think if you get in behind, you've got every chance, I think, of scoring goals against that Celtic team, because they're just not solid at all.
no, they're not. They're not. And listen, the whole viewpoint for Danny Rule at the moment, as you say, has to be focusing internally, not externally. So, yes, it will. As always with these Old Firm games, it will take care of itself, I suppose. But we've got the chance, and I think that's absolutely what we've been missing in terms of more recent Old Firm games as well. So it's about what we do, as you quite rightly say, and that's the most important thing, as always. That will do us for this week on Extra. Thank you so much, everyone, for being able to listen in. If you would like to hear more from us, including obviously all of the build-up towards Sunday's League Cup semi-final, please join us on our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Rob, I would be remiss if I didn't give a plug to the excellent Let's Go series that you guys have been doing on Patreon. You've covered a lot of managers, and there's been a lot of turmoil, but the series at the moment is heading towards the good times.
It is. We're at the 55 season. We've just started. and we're going to take our time with this one. There's been an element, I think. I joined the team that's been doing that show at the start of Ali McCoy's reign as manager, so there's not been a lot to celebrate, and we've rattled through the seasons at times. But this one we're going to take our time on, so it's great if you're interested in reliving every minute of the 55 season, not just from the stuff that we did, but all the crazy shenanigans and everything else from the other side of the city. Then I thoroughly recommend it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's been great, some great listening so far as well, and it's the fact that it's like a time capsule basically, because it reminds you of the things that you've well long forgotten about everything that's been happening across the course of not just the season, but as you say, the kind of games that got us in that way, and the things that, like I say, I'm getting older and older nowadays, so I can barely remember my own name. But the some of the stuff that you guys are kind of going into, and some of the detail of it as well, you have that flashback. And, oh God, yeah, I remember that. But as it's an excellent series, and you guys are doing a great job on it. Thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to all for listening. I hope that Sunday is very fortuitous for you all listening in the Rangers way. And David will be back with you on Monday to unpack it. But just before we finish, Rob, thank you so much for joining me, buddy. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. And as I say, it's great to get your opinion on things.
Thank you, Cammy. Really enjoyed it, and I hope your team wins on Sunday.
Right, thanks everyone for listening. David will be back on Monday. Speak to you then. Bye bye.